This is the Sustainable Goat Podcast.
We look to nature for how we should interrelate to the world. All the answers are within nature if we take the time to listen.
But what we have to find is a reasonable way how to handle plastic.
You know, consumers expect more. They're expecting brands to be more sustainable. They're choosing sustainable brands.
These are the stories and ideas from those that will define a generation. I'm your host, Steve Cassinem, and this is our planet in focus.
Stoked you guys are here. I'm really excited about this conversation. I think it'd be awesome just to start with golf in general. So I think golf is on a huge upswing right now, especially with, full swing coming out, and you have all these exciting things happening in the golf world. But you have a lot of people who are introduced to it in a very different way, and I think there's a huge opportunity that we're going through this shift in golf. But I want to start with, where did both of you start by playing golf? How early did you start playing golf? And Andrew or Andre, we can start with either one of you.
I guess as the old guy here, I'll go first. Age before beauty, is that what they say? I remember my first round of golf being at a little 9-hole course in the Cleveland Metro Parks. I believe I was 11 or 12, little 9-hole course. And I was introduced to golf. My brother played, who's a little bit older than me, so I had some interest. But my aunt, we used to walk down in the Cleveland Metro Parks Valley with her dogs, and all the trails would go next to the golf courses. And she would just have golf clubs and golf balls in her garage that people would chuck into the woods that she would pick up and keep. And I remember just one day I was bored. I went to the high school field next to her house, the football field, with a couple balls and the 7-iron she had. And I was just taking divots out of the football field turf in the middle of the summer. And I remember the grounds guy coming up, and I thought I was going to get in trouble. And he's like, "Man, have fun. Looks like you're doing great." And that was kind of it. Couple days a week, just hitting balls in a field, going 40, 50 yards, played golf for the first time. And then a couple years later was when I actually kind of got invested into it, when I saw that baseball wasn't really taking me anywhere. So,
well, that's a hard transition between the baseball swing and the golf swing too. So I'd imagine there's a little bit of a decision there.
Actually, it was a fairly quick transition. Just the understanding of balance and twisting and rotation, the hand-eye coordination. It was just being able to kind of maneuver a few things in between to get your tilt correct, the plane of the swing. But yeah.
Yeah. Andre, when did you start?
I would say I really started when I was about 12 years old. My earliest introduction to golf was actually mini golf, or putt-putt, whatever you want to call it. There's a place in Vermont, which is where I grew up, and obviously the golf season's pretty short there. Can't golf at all in the winter. Even in the summer, half the days are raining. So grew up playing at this indoor mini golf and arcade, and just a fun place. There's not a lot of entertainment in Vermont, but Pizza Putt was like a fun place. I had my 5th birthday there, and they have this mini golf course where one course is like the pyramids of Egypt. One course is like a castle. One course is a ski slope. And it introduced me to the game in such an imaginative way that excited me as a kid. And then it was actually much later on, I suppose, kind of early adolescence, I'd say probably about 12 years old, when I started playing the Tiger Woods PGA Tour video game. And that introduced me to kind of the full strategy of golf and hitting a driver and irons and all that, and how you plan your way around a course. And something about that game just excited me. And I was like, "Hey, Dad, we got to go play golf. Let's go try this out." And I would visit my dad in Arizona once every summer for about 10 years or so. He lived out there. And it's 115 degrees every day in Arizona, so you can play golf. We paid about $35 total for both of us to go play some brown, dried out course. But of course, when the conditions are fast and firm, you can hit the ball further. And I was a baseball player too. I remember being 12 years old and hitting a 200-yard drive for the first time, finally connected with it. And just thinking wow, that's a 600-foot home run. So when golf gets you that feeling of hitting the sweet spot and connecting, that was exciting as a young athlete. Mm-hmm. And also just being out there. And my psychoanalytic theory would be that it was the first time I could beat my dad and my brother at something. I fell in love with the game for more the connection with nature that it gave me when I continued to play it and played more in Vermont around those courses, which are just, you're taking a stroll through the woods and they're so minimally maintained and the ground is so fertile. And in the summer, especially with that golden lighting you get at like 5-6 p.m., it's so nice.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite times to play golf is right at the end of the day. There's something special about that time where everything is just kind of slowing down. The temperature's changing. There's something about that. I mean, toss the shoes off and maybe go barefoot. Like there's something great about it. And I think that the perception around golf is different than most people who actually play it. What was kind of that? Was it the nature that kind of drew you to keep playing, or was it, just continuing to play golf?
For me, it was the opportunity to spend time with my mom and my brother who both played. They started playing before I did. And the opportunity to spend time outside with them, what kept me going. And then the friendships and the camaraderie of playing high school golf, and then in college going out with buddies, right? Like that was the thing, was friendship, camaraderie, wasn't serious, but enjoyed playing.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I kind of found when I played golf a lot as a kid. It was my dad and my brother, we both loved playing golf and grew up playing it. And so that, I remember being probably 7 or 8. I started when I was really young, so I was like, hey, this is a fun sport to keep them occupied and doing something, because I was always running around like crazy. And I vividly remember, some crisp, early mornings where you don't want to get up early when you're a kid. And you're like, no, we're going to go play golf, and you sleep on the car on the way. And then you wake up and it's early, dewy on the grass. And I got to spend 4 hours with my dad and my brother out on a golf course. That to me was so cool and something that I always remember. And then, of course, as you get older, you go into high school golf and you meet some friends that also play it. It becomes this like community aspect that I think it's touted as an individual sport, but it's very much community based.
Yeah, and for me, it was also that interplay of individual competitive spirit along with the connection. Because I played with my brother, my dad, also my uncle, and our friends, and they would always want to gamble. I have a family of very competitive people and gamblers who like to take risks, and I would just take their money every time, like once I started to get good at the game, and that was always very fun for me. And golf introduced me to consciously like the feeling of a flow state. I don't know how familiar you are with what a flow state is, but there are a few books on it. There's a book called The Rise of Superhuman or something like that by Stephen Kotler, along with Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's work, and they write about what extreme athletes experience and what people in the military experience and people in, let's say, martial arts or even tennis, could be croquet, whatever it is. But all of us have some kind of an activity that brings out this sense of presence and a sense of being in your body and connection to surroundings. And that inner critic becomes very quiet. And that sense of separateness becomes very quiet. And for me, that became an entrance into meditation, into yoga, eventually breath work, things that connected with me further, not just with nature, but with myself. And there began to be this interplay of my own development along with my connection to the game. And I feel like golf can really provide that to people, especially younger kids and youth golfers who can get into the game and they learn principles and learn a way of being that helps them in school, helps them in life. And that's true of many things, but I found that especially true of golf because of the level of concentration it requires and the challenge, but also when you get frustrated in golf, you can kind of step out of that. It's like stepping out of your own ego and saying, oh, wait, I'm playing a game. And I found that ability to have kind of metacognition, as they would call it, is something transferred into life.
It's something I was taught when I was young, was that like there are a lot of life lessons in golf. And when I was younger, I didn't at all understand it. I was like, yeah, but I'm trying to win this game. I'm going to win it. And then you realize there's no winning in golf, for one, because it's just you and the course. And then you find this beautiful side of being able to process what you go through in life out on a golf course, and you're immersed in nature in that process. I found that to me now is the biggest thing, and the reason why I play golf is it's that way to reset the mind, and it's to be present in what you're doing. You're out on the course, you're out in nature, and sure, you may be hitting this ball towards a hole 400 yards, and that game is seemingly ridiculous, but there's so much more to the human aspect that's so important.
I would say, like, for me, yoga was a kind of transcendental thing for me in my golf journey. Just it helped bring awareness of self and body, and think of myself as just flesh and bone, and removing the ego, right? And sort of that quiet calm of the awareness of my emotions, my thoughts, being able to kind of control my breath. When I took that onto the golf course and combined that with growing affinity for nature and beauty, and this was around the time when I lived in New Mexico, and if you've ever been to New Mexico, it's just sprawling vistas and incredible sunrises and sunsets, and as far as the eye can see, and it was just incredible experience, and that was, I found it really interesting how something that I really discredited, like yoga, and never gave it a shot, I finally gave it a shot, and my world just exploded, and I don't know, everything's been great since then. So
when did you two both start to get into golf as more of a career choice, as a focus on what you guys wanted to do?
Well, for me, it was going into my sustainability program at the University of Vermont. I took the Sustainable Innovation MBA. I began to learn about regenerative agriculture, the concept that essentially land management can be a way to not only create sustainability, but actually reverse some of the harm that we've done to the environment. And that's just applying traditional, really ancient farming practices. Mm-hmm. And I began to wonder, well, could you apply those sort of practices to the game of golf? And I remember Googling the term regenerative golf, and the first person that came up was Paul Jansen, who was also who I wrote my first article about in Driving the Green. Mm-hmm. And he was working on, along with Nick Faldo, this design called Laguna Langko in Vietnam. What they did is they restored 5 hectares of rice paddy, which is not exactly enough to solve world hunger, but what they're doing is they're partitioning part of that land to no longer require inputs for the game of golf, because you're no longer wasting money, resources, fertilizer, et cetera, to maintain that land, but they're actually getting a productive use out of it. Mm-hmm. And being able to sell something, I believe what they do is actually just contribute and donate that to the local community, so they're more embedded in the local community, and creating through the design what Paul Jansen calls a sense of place, a sense of, because there's a rice paddy there, you're playing the golf course, and that golf course now has a unique character if you're visiting Vietnam as a tourist, let's say. And I don't want to ramble on all day about that, but anyway, just there's a sense of like art and science and design and culture, and even things as deep as spirituality or yoga or connection to self and others that really can be bridged together through golf. I started to realize that in my sustainability program, and reflecting on the fact that, because I wanted to combine sustainability and business, and I know this is a business podcast, business and for-profit ventures are ultimately the best way to address some of the challenges that we're facing, mm-hmm. right? Because that's just a universal language, like golf is too. Mm-hmm. Golf is a language that anyone can speak. If you speak English or Espanol or Francais, it doesn't matter. You come together to play golf or soccer and other sports, but there's a universal body language in golf. And then in business, there's this universal language of finance. And it's a matter of using universal languages to connect around universal challenges like sustainability, which is a very catch-all term, but that includes, because these issues are not independent, they're interdependent, issues like gender equality, along with land management, along with the atmosphere, life and water. These are all interconnected issues and also opportunities.
100%. And Andrew, when did you start kind of trending towards golf as a career side of things?
It was shortly after college, early 2000s, standing over a fryer at a Publix grocery store frying chicken. I dreamed of working at a golf course until I finally quit my job and got a job at a golf course. I was 23, and it was like I'd made it. It was a minimum wage job, washing carts, 25 hours a week. And it was the best job I ever had. It was all the free golf I could play. And it was a passion. It was something I cared about. And it was a job where I actually took initiative and wanted to go above and beyond and learn more. And at the time, I was sort of being groomed to go into being a PGA professional, But then that was around the time my dad passed away. So I moved to Orlando and went to it's called the Professional Golf Career College. So it was a more or less golf trade school. It's a 16-month program where you get an associate's degree in professional golf management. And you take 40 classes on golf, from computers and business to the rules of golf to teaching to anatomy and physiology, all kinds of stuff, club fitting. So very well-rounded program. And from there, it was going after wanting to work in tournament administration. I did that till about 2020, and that was around the pandemic. I call it fun employed at the time, looking for work, but chasing a passion of golf and sort of trying to understand how sustainability fit into that. I remember it was early in the pandemic. It was India. There was, the world had shut down, so there was no airplane traffic. There's no car traffic. You could see a mountain for the first time because there was no smog. And I'm like, And it just sort of a light clicked. I was like, I wonder what sustainability in golf looked like. And then it was just a research project to answer that question, to understand who were the major players, what were the major associations doing, what kind of programs were going on. Did that fit with what the other industries were doing? And then it was sort of like, if we know that we need to keep global temperatures from exceeding 1.5 degrees of temperature increase, every industry has to be on board with any sort of push to mitigate temperature rise. And I was like, well, how does golf do that? Where does golf fit into that industry? Who's doing that? And then that sort of set me down the path to meet Andre.
What are kind of the challenges that I think golf is facing right now? You get a lot of criticism from public, water, use of grass, it's a waste of space. You kind of have this fight almost that the public says of like golf is a bad thing. And I think that, when you start to dive deeper into it and you start to get to know the people that are at the golf courses and you see their actual awareness around what's going on and their intentionality around providing a space for, not only the public, but for nature to thrive. What are some of the big challenges that I think golf is facing right now?
I think for me, it's just apathy and unawareness are the main challenges facing golf, and a sense that sustainability is something to defend against, right? Golf wants to defend against those critics or subtle protesters of the game, when our whole message is really to look at the opportunity, the strategic business opportunity of taking those 5.2 million acres and investing in those acres in a way that essentially maximizes land use value and ideally bridges the game with business, with the public sector, and could inspire the businesses that golf is connected with. And golf is so interconnected with business and capitalism in general. I think that's part of the image of golf. And to me, at least in the environmental camp, what I see as a challenge for golf is this inextricable kind of connection between golf and, let's say, far right politics or Trump, or golf just gets this rap as golf is big business, which is not how we see it. Golf is so many more things than that, as we've just discussed. Obviously, the level of connection it gives you to nature, how it gives you potentially life lessons. So I think it's the environmental camp doesn't necessarily see that side, and then the business side of golf, the more conservative, because there is a conservative camp in golf, of course, doesn't necessarily see the strategic business opportunity. Connecting back to how I got into golf as more of a career path, the two biggest statistics that stood out to me right away were looking at the acreage of golf. When you consider 38,000 18-hole equivalent golf courses in the world, they comprise 5.2 million acres, ranging a variety of ecosystems in, I believe it's 6 continents and over 200 countries. Wow. So that's a huge business opportunity and a way for potentially business to be inspired by golf as an example of strategic, sustainable business that's for profit, but also better for the environment and better for people that play the game. So the other stat was that 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs play golf, right?
Yeah.
So that got me thinking about, especially when Andrew and I and Alex met early on, how can golf be a leader, not just defending itself and being stuck in this defensive mindset and kind of survival mode around sustainability. And no, we're not doing that bad of a job. Let's release this report that says, golf doesn't use as much water as agriculture, which is a terrible comparison with no context at all. How can golf lead sustainability as a strategic business opportunity to reduce costs or improve revenues at the golf course green grass level and improve participation long term? So that's the challenge and the opportunity for golf, is how to get out of short-term defensive thinking in regard to sustainability and move toward more long-term strategic opportunistic thinking, which gets into the design phase of how to grow the game and how to maximize and optimize impact on the diversity of sustainability challenges. 17 sustainable development goals. That's why we wrote a white paper about it.
This leads into a lot of where, driving the green is now, and where you guys have this vision of building a better golf world. Andrew, what's kind of that side of driving the green that's kind of more or less driven you to put a lot of effort into this?
Community impact is really the biggest thing. I work in the municipal golf sector. Much of what I do is so much community facing. Yesterday, for instance, at Langston Golf Course, we had 11 volunteers from FEMA who came out for a day of service. And this was all led through a partnership we have with the Anacostia Watershed Society. And all 10 of those volunteers had never been on a golf course before. And so the opportunity to, one, tell them about the vision of the organization and what our goals are for creating community assets out of public parks that are golf courses, and, the environmental stewardship that we have. And I mean, the history of Langston Golf Course in and of itself is pretty incredible. Who it's named after, why it was built, who used to manage it. It was named after John Mercer Langston, who was our country's first African-American congressman from Virginia, abolitionist, civil rights leader, and the first dean of Howard Law School. It's located on Langston Golf Course, which is a plot of land that used to be a former landfill in a very low-income, underserved neighborhood of Washington, D.C., along one of the city's most polluted bodies of water. And the course was opened when no other courses in the city were open to African Americans. It's also a course that's home to the oldest men's and women's African American golf clubs, the Wade Robin Club and the Royal Golf Club. And so when you get people there and you just tell them the story, it's like incredible, right? And then you talk about what's our vision. And the vision is creating a golf course that is a sponge for stormwater runoff. So it filters all the dirty stuff before it gets into the body of water. And how does that become social justice or environmental justice? Well, the Anacostia River isn't a swimmable or fishable river. And so working with the Watershed Society, who has a goal of making the river swimmable and fishable by 2025, how do we improve the habitat on the golf course to act as that, to filter off stormwater runoff, to clean the nutrients out of the water before they get to that, right? So then it becomes a recreational outlet for people that are underserved, underrepresented, have been forgotten by the construction of highways or things like that, right? And so it's like, once you see that opportunity, what golf can do, and the possibilities are endless. It's all contextually based. It's like, what are the challenges of community? Go to a golf course and you can find it. You can find a solution, whether it's renewable energy, it's workforce development programs to give people jobs, right? Introduce them to the game of golf through a job, and then they can go pick up a club and start playing, right? As a different avenue. So.
Yeah, and I think what's so interesting is that balance between a municipal golf course versus a private golf course. I think people who aren't familiar with golf think every course is this exclusive thing that people don't really have access to, and the municipal golf course, that's around the corner from their house is not good, quote unquote. And so, like, well, why even go there? What's kind of that, I guess, roadmap to improve municipal golf? Because realistically, municipal golf is how most people play golf. It's how I grew up playing golf. It's how a lot of people grow up playing golf. So where's that value in society of municipal golf needing more of a platform versus
one thing I do want to add there? I do want to add that something like 3 in 4 golf courses in the country are public. So it is actually the case that the majority of golf courses are public. I live in Jupiter, Florida now, I believe in this state, 60% of golf courses are private, so it's a bit different. I grew up in Vermont where something like 90% of golf courses are public, and I played 18-hole round of golf at a beautiful course for probably $40 on a weekend. Right, so that was my introduction to the game. That's kind of the bias I have in the background. And someone who grows up in Florida, if you're underprivileged especially, will have the perspective that golf is exclusive and you don't have access to it. So municipal golf has the opportunity to be that access point, not just in the sense of creating affordability, but also inclusivity. And I did want to add that I read recently that the University of Michigan said, we included this in our white paper actually, something like 80% of the population lives in urban areas in the US. Right, so the US actually has this model where, this is the case in most of the world, just how populations tend to aggregate. People live in urban areas, right? And then you have a lot of open land outside of that. But how do you create open land within the urban area that can be a corridor for wildlife and also a way to connect with nature if you're living in an area that's very congested and essentially just, a huge mass of concrete, right?
Yeah.
And I believe by 2050, like 90% of the population is going to live in urban areas. So municipal golf has a huge advantage of not only being an access point for affordable, inclusive golf, but also being where the people are. So if you want to grow the game of golf, you need to improve the perception of golf within cities. That's creating a better product that's also affordable, sustainable, not just inclusive of a diversity of people, but also a diversity of land uses. So that if you use, let's say a typical golf course is 150 acres, with some variability, of course, there are 15,000 courses in the US. Not all of them are the same, depends on where you are. There are just many ways to use that land, whether it's energy production or, as Andrew mentioned, stormwater filtration and runoff management. Golf can become an inspiring model, not just to the businesses that it's connected with, but also young kids or field trips that can visit the course and have golf as an introduction to like STEM education.
Yeah, you have a background more in data, and Andrew, you can pop in totally.
I just wanted to add, going back to Andre's point about, urban centers and population moving there, the protection of the green space is so much more important now because the land is going to be so much more valuable, right? For construction, for anything, right? And we cannot really lose any more green space within our urban environments. And if that green space happens to be a golf course, it's our job to change that perception, right? To show, that's why we use the language of the SDGs, because that provides that universal language for someone who does not understand golf, but is in a municipal position, right? I'm able to go in and talk to someone about industry innovation and how what we're going to do to redesign the clubhouse and how that's going to affect the community, or health and well-being, right? We know with the RNA's report a few years ago, holding steady for socioeconomic status, the average golfer lives 5 years longer. Why is that? It's because you're outdoors, you're exercising, and you're around green grass, right? The color, the softening of the noise, you hear birds, you hear water, you hear your friends, right? You don't hear horns, you don't hear a keyboard clicking, your phone's not ringing sometimes. You take the stress out of yourself and you're able to alleviate those things. And that's why it's so important to expand the game to people that don't know anything about it, because it's a wonderful opportunity to spend time outside.
We've had a podcast guest where we talked a lot about the subconscious reaction to having nature around you. So even if, in this case, it was in an indoor space and it was having, moss plant walls, just by having greenery around you, you actually relax a bit more. And there's, urban centers, you're losing those green spaces in a way where subconsciously as humans, I feel like we need that in order to thrive.
Let's go back to why municipal golf was created, right? Coming out of World War II, the government saw the need to, as the country was expanding out of urban environments into suburban environments, was to protect green space. And one way to protect green space and provide revenue for that park was to put a golf course on it. Right?
I didn't know that.
So the municipal game, obviously municipal courses have been around for a very long time, but that flux of very heavily investing in the 50s, 60s, 70s of municipal courses all stems from wanting to protect that green space. The industry at the time really missed an opportunity, right, to really show. And I mean, of course, this comes with the dawn of television, Arnold Palmer, right, like Arnie's Army on TV. And, then you finally get pictures of Augusta, and it's like this image of, Andre, help me out here, like this thing that you want, but you can't reach, right? The longing for something that looks so perfect, but it's so hard to attain. And that perception built up over years, and then you mix in capitalism and everything else with it, and how we market to people, and what's best is what is the greenest or the most expensive or the newest product, instead of going back to, it doesn't matter. Like 200 years ago when they were playing this game, they had a stick tied together with a rock on the end, or like, and they were hitting a ball, right? Like, it didn't matter how new your equipment was. Obviously it did, because it broke a lot, but.
Yeah. Well, and Andre, you have a background more in data, and, in our past conversation, what was so interesting to me is what the data points to in why people play golf. I think you have one side where it's, it's this top level sport, it's green, new clubs, new balls, new this, new that. Why do people actually play golf by the data?
So one thing I do want to preface with there, I meant to add to my sort of bio I gave about myself, my career background, how I combined golf and sustainability, and ended up moving down to Florida. I started working for the National Golf Foundation, which is the premier kind of source of data on especially participation in golf, the number of golf courses. They have the most refined database on all of those kind of key figures around golf. Because of golf, I began to work as a data analyst, which if you ask my 5-year-old self, what's your dream job? Is like data analytics. I mean, probably not, but I found it immensely useful to get into data because it provides some objective basis of reality. Right? And golf introduced me to this desire and longing to seek the truth, because golf is a sport that has this core value of integrity, whether you like it or not. I mean, you can lie about your score, you can get in your ego and say like, oh, well, this is how far I hit a driver, this is how far I hit my 6-iron, and the data would just not agree with that, and then golf has this ability to punish you for not being aligned with the truth, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a natural connection between data analytics and golf. With the National Golf Foundation, I got into survey research, which was really surveying a panel of what they would call core golfers, understanding what are their preferences, what are their tendencies, what are the lifestyle, behavioral, demographic, and also psychographic attributes of golfers. And the psychographic variables were really interested in me. I began to get into consumer survey research. And it's tough to get at. If you ask people why do they do something, we're not always conscious of why we do things, right? But my passion for the game always interested me in wondering more about why do I play golf? And as we reflected earlier, why I play golf is sort of there's a depth psychological element and a connection to surroundings and self and family and friends, and also that desire to improve, like Andrew was saying, seeing perfection, this ideal image in the future, and it's almost like the American dream in a way. That's sort of the 50s, 60s era of golf is an extension of that American dream and that desire for individual excellence. So I always assume part of the reason that people play golf is that it's the pursuit of what Maslow would call self-actualization, right? That tip of the pyramid, kind of will to power, drive to be excellent. But there are also those other aspects of the game, and even golf can be a way to address health, as Andrew mentioned. It's been proven that golfers live longer than average, even if you control for socioeconomic status. So there are a variety of reasons to play the game, but what people say, and we've asked this to, I believe it was 500 National Links Trust golfers, why do you play golf? We provide them an aided list of possible reasons. One of those reasons is kind of self-actualization and challenging oneself to be the best you can be, to improve score and handicap. But the other reasons are sort of physical health, mental health, connection with friends and loved ones. And then also other kind of competitive needs, like being in a country club atmosphere, having that sense of exclusivity and being a part of a classy environment and feeling like you belong to, a country club, that kind of an atmosphere. And those competitive needs in general are what are actually at the bottom of that list. And what floats to the top are what I just mentioned, things like connection to self and others, physical health, mental health, and connection with nature. And we found that essentially 95% of the golfers we surveyed would list at least one of those things: physical health, mental health, connection with nature and loved ones, in their top list of reasons they play golf. And people typically select one or two things from this list. So that's really saying something, that 95% of golfers would include one of those attributes I just mentioned as the main reason they play the game, essentially.
Wow.
Right? And that's not the marketing model that golf caters to at the moment. The marketing model is, without calling out any names, if you look at the slogans, it's "we're the best in golf and you're going to be the best in golf." It's all about really emphasizing that individual excellence and sense of separation, when really what golfers are longing for is connection. And I think industries that have grown, like the yoga industry, or if you want to call it an industry, it's sort of the mind-body industry in general, or things like Orange Theory Fitness and all of these kind of group fitness offerings, things that are analogous to golf, at least in the same space of sports and entertainment and self-improvement, have been able to grow a lot by marketing a model of connection and belonging, which really, going back to municipal golf, that's what golf has always been about. And as Andrew mentioned, when it was invented something like 500 years ago, golf was just played by a bunch of drunk Scots kind of hitting rocks into rabbit holes and like, oh, let's just see where this ball goes. And there wasn't that sense of seriousness or kind of ego about golf.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what the industry kind of feeds on a bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, and Andrew, how do you take that data and actually start to communicate that to the people who are running the municipal golf courses? Because I think that's kind of the ultimate part is, you have this data and you have this disconnection between the public. How do you communicate that to the municipal golf courses? Because that's ultimately, it's almost like this balance in this, I don't know, it's like a chicken and the egg kind of thing. Do you educate the public, or do you educate the municipal golf course who educates the public? Which one kind of comes first? How do you kind of communicate that data in a way that can inspire action?
I don't know. That's a very great question. I can't tell you whether the chicken or the egg comes first. You know what I mean? It's a multifaceted sort of, I don't want to attack the other strategy, right? Like, you want to use the power of the people, which is their purchasing power, right? Mm-hmm. So education is great, but it's not fair to put the onus and the responsibility on them to do everything. I can't expect every person that shows up to one of our 3 municipal golf courses here in DC to bring their reusable water bottle every time, or not use the plastic fork and have their own, or, you know what I mean? Like, really think through what their purchases are. They just want to come out and have fun, spend time outdoors, spend time with their friends, right? So then the strategy has to be, all right, so let's educate the public on what the organization is doing. Okay, so let's take the data. And this is where sustainability is, right? It's the business case for sustainability. I feel like it shouldn't have to be a business case, but that's the way we have to present it, because it's all about cutting costs and being more efficient, right? So you can dedicate resources elsewhere. And it's really just understanding, okay, I don't want to name names, but we had a previous waste hauler who wouldn't allow us to do a recycling program at one of our courses, right? And their costs just kept going up and the service kept going down, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like, all we had to do was just get out of the contract and start a new one with someone that actually has a dedicated recycling program and a sustainability consultancy that can help us understand and really be a partner of mine in communicating the needs, right? But it's the savings of just looking at your business operations, right? Audits from lighting to waste, right? And maintenance practices. And this feeds into, Andre, you can jump in here with the USGA program that they're doing.
You're referring to the Deacon tool and heat mapping?
I am, yes. So the Deacon tool, basically it's a GPS device that you would wear, and it heat maps where you go on the golf course, and you give it to 100 golfers one day. You track the data, and then you can determine, okay, the placement of this bunker really impeded the pace of play for the entire day because of where it's located. And I know that I have to spend several hours a week on maintaining that bunker, right? Mm-hmm. So what happens if I remove that bunker? I would take out a resource hog, something that's going to pull from what I need, and it's going to speed up my play, which means people have a more enjoyable experience around the golf course, right? And so being able to take that data and present it and then develop a strategy around how do you optimize the experience for the golfer while improving your efficiencies and your operational capacity at the same time. I mean, that's what's so delicate about municipal golf, and that's why there's so much education around to the non-golfer of what municipal golf is. It's low cost, low profit, low barrier of entry. Mm-hmm. And yesterday I made the comment, like, you could literally walk to a municipal golf course, having never been on a golf course, walk into the golf shop, ask for a putter and a ball, go to the practice putting green, and do it for free. And someone was like, I could do that? I'm like, absolutely you could do that. Please do it. You know, and it's like the image is the country club, right? Mm-hmm. And so how do you change that? I'm rambling a little bit here. Maybe.
No, not at all. And more importantly, I think, Andrew, with your background in golf course management, I got to look into the golf course that I play here locally in Colorado. I thought I had an understanding of golf course management from, playing it, but it is so much deeper than I thought it was. From the sand, from the machinery that's used, the maintenance of that machinery, the water management. I mean, what goes on behind the scenes of a golf course that people don't see? Because I think that's one of the most important things. Is I think people think when people are off the golf course, they just turn the sprinklers on all night and then turn it off the next day and say, go have fun.
We give a lot of praise to the superintendents that work at very high-end country clubs, but they also have pretty much unlimited budgets. We should really be giving praise to the municipal golf directors of agronomy and course superintendents, because they're MacGyver, right? Like, they have to take 2 sticks and some duct tape, repair the mower or the T-mower, right? Like, you have to find ways to be creative to get by so that you can keep the doors open and keep going. And we, as municipal golf, can't really live in that space anymore. Like, I've lived in that space personally, like paycheck to paycheck. Very scary, right? Where you can't plan for the future. You don't know what's going to happen. You're just trying to live day to day. And so sustainability offers an opportunity for these golf courses to really think long term, right? So here in DC, we're in the midst of 3 years, so 50 years to manage the 3 municipal courses here. We're not managing for the next 50 years. We're managing for the next 200 years, right? It's the opportunity to completely recreate what exists to make something that lasts in the future. And the way I recently described it was like, we want our golf course to be the drop in a lake, right? And what emanates from the golf course is the ripples of positive social impact that emanate throughout our urban environments. So.
Mm-hmm. Well, and you definitely hit on something that, Andre, I think you can speak a lot to, is this idea of the finance can drive it. I think I've been having a lot of conversations around, what sustainability actually does mean. And, to me, it's always seemed as something that's just a good business decision. It's more efficiency. If you can use your own waste to power your building, or if you can, use any extra water to then, water a crop that you might have on the property, that's just a smart decision. It's not necessarily this, oh, well, you have to make this decision. It's going to improve long term, and it's a good financial decision. And so where do you see that bridge kind of happening in golf? Because in a more specific manner, because I think that's where that turning point often happens. You see a lot of industries grow because suddenly there's money in it, and that's where the change can actually happen. But if you're, again, going paycheck to paycheck, as Andrew mentioned, it's kind of hard to make progress.
One thing I would add is that, so again, 15,000 courses in the U.S., and most of those, especially the public courses, are effectively small businesses with a handful of employees. I mean, Andrew can speak to that more, but what's the average number of employees? Would be like a dozen or so, and the superintendent does a lot of work. So the criticism of golf's relationship with sustainability, because what the environmental camp who's not as connected to the business of golf may not understand, is that managing a golf course is very challenging, right? You have limited resources, especially at the municipal level, which is often publicly funded. There's an increasing pressure to manage those scarce resources in a more efficient way.
What I find really fascinating that you mentioned is that course it has rice paddies. How can you use these spaces for more things? A lot of courses, at least here in Colorado, you have signs that say, hey, no walking on the course, no doing this, no doing that. It's how do you open it up to more opportunity? Because if you can run a crop on the side of the 12th hole where only, again, with GPS trackers, that only 2 people a month even hit the ball and head towards that direction, you can actually create another revenue stream that can sustain the business even more, which then can provide more opportunity.
Right. And if a course has, the statistic from GCSAA is that the median golf course is 150 acres, which isn't the most meaningful number because as I've gotten more and more into data analytics, I realized that speaking statistically about averages rarely describes reality, especially in golf with those 15,000 golf courses. There's a lot of variability, right? You have private resorts that have 500 acres, but there might be an even greater opportunity to invest in larger agricultural operations, even you can get food production, or depending on agricultural zoning laws, there are other challenges in that kind of space of multifunctional golf courses. But anytime that you can take underutilized land and either reduce the amount of money, inputs, et cetera, that you're putting into that land, or even go beyond that and generate a source of revenue and a source of growing participation and interest in your property that can drive people to the game of golf, you're reducing costs and revenues. Like that's business at the end of the day. Those are the two bottom line statistics, data, whatever you want to call it, that really matter. It's are you generating cash flow? How much are you spending? Right. So if you can reduce the amount you're spending or improve revenue, especially long term by growing the game, getting people more interested, changing the image of golf, essentially, it's just smart business.
We talked a little bit about data from an analytics perspective. Data is something where you collect raw data, but then it's how you connect those numbers. So can you dive a little bit into just the idea of data, like how you can almost extrapolate anything you want to say out of data? It just depends how you read it.
Right. Well, something that's come up to me sort of multiple times throughout this call that I think connects a number of things we talked about is this concept of thinking in systems, and that there is a relativity to data. When you look at a data set, you can't just extract out one data point out of its context and use that to describe reality. That's rarely the case. You need multiple data points. You need to integrate, kind of triangulate almost the way that GPS works, right? I'm not an expert on GPS, so I won't go into that. But essentially, the way that GPS finds your location is using satellites from different locations in the atmosphere to triangulate your position on the Earth, let's say. That's true on a variety of levels, but in data analytics, it's true in the sense that you really want to have multiple supporting data points to connect to a larger data point. And numbers are or can be relative. And going back to thinking in systems, golf was an entrance into that kind of understanding of reality for me. And the understanding came through my body. It wasn't even really data. It was, listening to your body and intuition is a form of data in its own way, right? Mm-hmm. There are many ways to understand reality or get a sense of reality. And human beings, we have 5 senses, and golf really engages us in balancing and integrating those senses to understand accurately how far away is that pin? How far do I need to hit it? What does that shot feel like in my body? So golf introduced me to that language and that understanding of reality and thinking in systems and seeing that, if my wrist is a little bit tight, my hips are going to move this way. And then yoga showed me that same thing. And eventually golf also led me into data analytics, which just applies that same framework of understanding reality to statistics, to numbers.
I find that so interesting because if somebody says, hey, how far away do you think that is? My immediate thing is like, it's about 200 yards. Right. Like, it's immediately a golf thing of like, I imagine a pin at the other end. I'm like, yeah, that's about.
Well, and human beings have developed a set of eyes. We're not cyclops because we need to be able to assess distance. So it's having, like, literally eyeballs are multiple data points. You can think of it that way, right? We're getting data in the left eyeball and the right eyeball. And it's a triangulation of 2 sets of data to understand something as simple as distance. right? So human beings are naturally data analysts through our senses.
I was going to say, you also have to understand where the data is going to lie to you too, right? When I teach golf, one of the things I do is I help people understand what their dominant eye is, right? Because your dominant eye is going to take in information sooner than your less dominant eye, right? And so understanding if I turn my head, I'm right eye dominant. So on my backswing, if I turn my head too far, my nose blocks out my right eye, which then it shifts to my left. But then when my right eye takes back over, that ball shifts in perception, right? And so understanding that, I'm just trying to tie it back here to the data and understanding that data can lie to you and being able to pick that out and have the awareness to pluck out anything that doesn't make sense.
Well, and Andrew, what's kind of your mission in the long term for driving the green for every golf course to expand outside of DC to other municipalities?
I don't know. That's a great question. Like, driving the green is kind of fluid, right? Like, it's a collection of thought leadership, right? Like that's the idea behind it, is a platform where people like us can tell stories, interview people, do research, and just provide a medium for people. If they're interested, they can come and learn. Long term for the golf industry, it's a vision of leadership, wanting to be here. I want people, I don't have any kids, I'm not planning to have any, but I want other people's kids to enjoy this game and to get out of it what I've gotten, because it has so much personal, professional, internal, external benefit to anyone that is willing to participate. And, I want people to give a crap about the world, right? And I know that this is where I'm meant to be, and it's just a matter of what can I do to support the cause.
Andre, for you, I mean, from a data perspective, I think there's a huge, and even not from a data perspective, there's a huge opportunity to make an impact just on the bigger golf stage, if you will. I mean, you look at a pro event, and it's completely different than a municipal event. It is an event. They build almost a city in a few days for all these people to come, traffic, watch golf, and then they leave. What's kind of that opportunity that you guys have to make an impact on the bigger golf stage and have it go straight to municipality as well?
Well, golf as a sport and the sporting industry, entertainment industry in general, has two advantages. One being so tied with sponsorship and business, but also attracting a lot of attention, a lot of eyeballs. So golf has this position of leadership and influence, whether it likes it or not. And we see that and want to affect the variety of stakeholders that golf is nested within. And that word really comes to mind, connecting back with data analytics and how you integrate multiple data points. Data can be this very abstract term, but I've done qualitative and quantitative research. Qualitative research involves doing focus groups, right, and interviews, in-depth interviews with individuals sometimes. Getting someone's perspective, just asking someone questions and getting a bottom-up understanding of people's needs, people's perspectives, is data analytics. I mean, quite literally, even in quantitative, quote-unquote, research that I've done, it becomes statistically valid when you reach a certain, let's say we're going to interview through a survey 500 golfers. That's a quantitative survey that has statistical validity. At the end of the day, that's a compilation of individuals' responses to questions that we're asking. So having a conversation with someone is a form of data analytics. And it's easy to get wrapped up in the abstractions. At least for myself, I like to think at a very high kind of systems view level of reality. But through driving the green, what we want to do is ground things into what is necessary at the individual level, what's necessary in the context of certain cities, municipalities, or municipal golf courses, because everything is really context dependent and relative. So for us, we've developed a consulting approach to bridge that higher level theory understanding of sustainability and what it can do for the game of golf to more of the individual level, which begins with what we would call materiality assessment, which itself is just a way of integrating perspectives. Think of a graph where you have a 2x2 matrix. On the y-axis, what matters to your external stakeholders, your golfers, your customers, your community partners and regulators. And then on the x-axis, what matters to your internal stakeholders, your superintendents, your business owners, your part-time employees, NGO partners perhaps. Right. All of those different stakeholder groups have their own perspective on what matters. That's what a materiality assessment measures, is what matters. And we did that for the National Links Trust courses, and Andrew can speak more to that. We asked golfers and internal stakeholders at NLT, what matters to you? Let's list out these 17 sustainable development goals, because sustainability is not just one thing. It's an infinite number of things. And at least in that framework of universal government language around sustainability developed by the United Nations, sustainability comprises 17 areas. So let's rank order them. What matters the most to internal stakeholders and to the business itself, and what impacts stakeholders surrounding the business? Things that float to the top are essentially economics, health and well-being, and equality, things that we've discussed throughout this call. That's bottom up. That's not just our top-down theory anymore. Now it's bottom up, asking individuals through a survey interview in this case, what matters to you? What do you want us to do with this golf course?
Well, and Andrew, from your perspective, I think that's kind of actionable stuff of, why sustainability actually matters too. You have these 17 different basically factors that go into it, and you have clear leaders in a space. And so more of my question is, what is sustainability to you now at this point, after diving through this data, after actually talking to people, getting in with the community, seeing an equitable side of things? What's sustainability to you?
Sustainability is regeneration, right? It's the word that isn't sustainable, right?
Yeah, right. We've talked about that a little bit.
It's just survival. It's just survival.
Exactly.
Right? As Andrew said, businesses and individuals want to be out of survival mode. You want to be thinking about paycheck to paycheck. Then you can't think long term at all, and you're in fight or flight mode, which, if you're playing golf or in business or just trying to have a productive life, being in fight or flight mode never helps, right? So that term is very on point. Regeneration and processes that are regenerative and healing and circular, where there's no such thing as waste, which are just the processes that come out of nature. Those regenerative processes, in the case of business products and services, naturally create sustainability. Regenerative processes naturally create the ability for something to be sustained for long-term generational outcomes.
I think that's a very important point, because we've talked about this a little bit, the idea of sustainability as even the word that the industry holds up on. And it's more about circularity, resiliency, and this ability to, create something that can regenerate and keep going and provide more value into the system. I mean, I remember very first podcast on Sustainable Goat. One of the most important things that was ever said was that in nature, 1 + 1 does not equal 2. It can equal so much more than that. And that's where I think this idea of sustainability has been, kind of shifted a little bit, because it's not just about creating something out of recycled materials. It's not just about, being able to create solar power energy. It's what is the long term? How can the system feed itself and grow on top of it and create more than just the simple 1 + 1 = 2? And so, Andrew, on your side, kind of what is that in regenerative side of things? What does that look like in terms of golf, municipality, community, and kind of the ability to create a better future?
Partnerships, I think, is a good word, right? We know we can't do everything on our own. So we know it's telling your story to find a likeness with other organizations, a shared mission, right? So some of the results of that materiality assessment were what floated to the top were good health and well-being, gender equality, and decent work and economic growth, right? So in telling the story of municipal golf and going forward, we touched on the exposure of people just being on a golf course potentially helps you live longer. We can create an internship program for inner city youth to come out and learn the business of golf. We can teach you how to caddy, which there's so many opportunities that come from being a caddy and being exposed to the golf course, right? You learn about business, you learn about responsibility, you learn about communication, you learn about direction and how to give it and how to receive it. You learn awareness and thinking forward and ahead, right? And so there's so many opportunities, right? And then if you're looking at gender equality, it's how do we design a golf course so that anyone can play it? And how do we remove labels that exclude certain aspects of our society and how they want themselves to be represented, right? So it's no longer listing men's handicap and women's handicap. How do we find something to where there's a general handicap for someone who doesn't identify as either, right? Because golf is the most equitable sport in the sense that we have this handicap system to where anyone can play anyone. Yet you step on the golf course and there's a curb on the tee box or the practice putting green, and someone in a wheelchair can't go and practice putting. Or you look at a scorecard and you don't see what you identify as, so where do you participate? This is the future that golf has, is to help change that narrative, to focus on being inclusive, being accessible, and just providing love, being a beacon of light.
That's the right thing to do, but Syngenta Golf also had a report suggesting that there's literally a $35 billion economic opportunity for golf to address gender equality. Just based on their survey, they projected out, I can't remember the number exactly, but if a certain number of women who, according to their survey, based on the percentage who said they would be interested in trying golf in the next 2 years, if they just tried golf in the next 2 years, that represents like a $35 billion value to the industry, which I know in the US alone, golf already accounts for a direct impact of like $84 billion, and it's a global industry. Right, so it's the right thing to do, and it also just makes sense for the industry. That's why all these companies, even if they're not always aligned with love and light and rainbows, sometimes as much as we love that, they want to sell more golf clubs, they want to sell more equipment. Like, that just makes sense for them to include as many people as possible, and that requires updating the product of the game, paradoxically, to not be so ego-driven or exclusive or creating a sense of separation and elitism, but really inclusivity and community, which municipal golf is probably the best positioned of any stakeholder in the industry to address.
Yeah, I think one of my early experiences playing golf was just that idea that you go to a municipal course and, you have a tee time and you go, hey, I'd like to go out. And you meet some person on the tee box you would have never met before in your life. And you spend the next 4 hours with that person. And you find out, one, how do they get frustrated versus not, because golf can be frustrating. You have conversations about humanity, what they believe in, what they do for work, their family. I mean, they're complete strangers when you start. And I feel like after those 4 hours, you can become either acquaintances and or friends. That's where I think the beauty of golf can be. And that I think a lot of people who are freshly introduced to it don't get to experience that just you're with, Tom or Betsy on the tee box and you don't know who that is. They could know somebody that you know, and it creates this opportunity for connection that I think is a beautiful part of the game. And I think obviously not really something that's focused on, but I also think that's part of the bigger picture of educating people on what golf can bring to the table for people's lives outside of just spending 4 hours on a course. So final question kind of for both of you. Where is your favorite place to enjoy nature on the whole planet? It might be a golf course, but it also might not be.
That's a hard question. I'm going to say golf just because that's my profession, it's my passion. I was a little bit of a birder when I was younger with my dad, and I picked it up in my 40s. I was like, on my 40th birthday, I watched A Big Year. Not familiar. Don't know if you're familiar with that movie.
Not entirely.
Steve Martin, Jack Black. It's about The Big Year. It's based on identifying as many birds in North America as possible. And what it used to be was this is way back in the day, you would kill as many different birds as you could until we were just decimating bird populations. And then conservations came in no, you can just identify them and we'll trust you. And so this movie, it's a cute story about, Jack Black and Steve Martin and Owen Wilson's in it as well. But for me, my happy place is on a golf course in nature because I can listen to birds, I can see mountains and rivers and just be immersed in nature, yet be challenged physically and emotionally and mentally. And I think that's what amplifies being in nature is that it's like driving in a snowstorm. It's just a very intense feeling, where you have to focus so intently. In golf, you have to focus so intently because one stray thought and you hit your ball in the water or the woods or whatever, right? And I don't know. So for me, I think that's where it is.
Where is that golf course? Is it a 12th hole somewhere? Is it an 8th hole in a different state? Where's your favorite golf course or place to be?
It's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's Twin Warriors Golf Club is one of my favorite golf courses. It's on the Santa Ana Reservation. It's along the Rio Grande Bosque, which is it's the name for the land around a river. And you're just hitting down this par 5 and you're overlooking the Rio Grande with the Sandia Mountains. I believe it's hole number 16. It's a par 5. And it's just, I don't know, you stand up at the top of the hill, you go down about 300 feet, and you're just overlooking this vista of mountains and the Rio Grande. You know, it's just such a peaceful moment. And then you draw back to thinking about the cultural significance and the history of that place and what happened 400 years earlier and what's happening now while I'm playing it, and the appreciation of the shared space and the history and the honor, right? And that's another aspect of really being in nature on a golf course, is the passing of time and what people were doing on that exact space 1,000 years earlier versus what I'm doing today.
Yeah, that's amazing. And Andre, what about for you?
So after all that talk about data analytics and numbers, I'm going to give more of a rainbow love and light answer. And for me, my favorite place to experience nature is in the human heart and in connection and being in community. And in the last few years, my life has been really blessed with a lot of community, including my relationships with Andrew and Alex, Driving the Green. There's a jiu-jitsu community I'm involved with now that I'm very connected with. Yoga communities I've been a part of. The Simba program I took, I met amazing people who are all on their own individual journeys of leading sustainability and witnessing this orchestration of solutions that are needed to address the plethora of challenges facing us. You can't, we have that humility about the limitations of what golf can do to heal the environment, let's say. At least being in this individual kind of niche community of golf and sustainability has given such a sense of connection and a reminder that we come from nature. Humans are nature, right? So creating that sense of there's kind of a definition of nature that inherently makes it separate from us when nature is actually within. But not to be completely abstract and dodge your question, like I did play a round of golf at Old Course at St. Andrews on my trip to Scotland 2.5 years ago at this point. 3.5, wow. Time flies. There was such an amazing sense of connection to that land, and witnessing the birth of golf in a very physical place was just amazing. It was humbling and inspiring, and I played one of the best rounds of golf in my life. I won't say what my score was, but it was like one of the best scores I've ever shot. And I had no sleep. So it was a sense of like total flow state, and almost without getting too mystical, it's like the golf course played through me. And I witnessed that in other people that I saw playing there. Like they were just so connected, and there's that sense of gratitude. Combining those two answers together, like golf to me is a place of connecting to human nature within and the human heart, connecting to friends and loved ones, but also connecting to the surroundings. And it's not a sense of gaining, it's actually losing that sense of separateness. It's interesting what can happen on the golf course.
Yeah.
And I highly recommend the book Golf in the Kingdom on that subject.
Interesting. Okay. On the list.
Just a book recommendation, and the one that's really projected me on my path for really reevaluating golf for me, and was The Greatest Game Ever Played. I've watched the movie, but the book was just hands down. From then on, when I play golf, it's like, and it doesn't matter what the weather is outside. If I'm going to play golf, the question is, if I was in Scotland today and the only chance I had to play golf was right now, and this was the weather, would I play? The answer is absolutely yes. Why can't I play in Washington, D.C. in 40-degree weather with slight rain? I can still get the same experience and maybe have more fun than I would if it was 75 and sunny and crowded on the golf course, right? And so once I can remove the ego and be like, let me just go enjoy time and space and the challenge of being in the elements. That's what the game of golf is be in the elements. You can't just play in a perfect environment every time. That's what's so beautiful about it. And why, I look down at football or not football, but like basketball or these indoor sports where it's in an arena with like a fixed environment.
Perfection.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that some of my best stories from golf are the ones where it's huge amounts of wind or it's freezing cold, and for some reason you get this bond with the people that you're with because you almost endured something. And the idea that you can play the same golf course every single day and it will be different every single day. And I think that grounds you in this sense of you're humbled by the fact that you're just in this natural place, and nature's going to dictate what that day is going to be like. You become a part of that. You can't say, well, I will only do it during these times. I mean, you could, but I think you're missing out on that truly special experience of just going through something, just being like, wow, that was incredible. I find that beautiful about golf. And I think what's so interesting about both of your approaches to golf is that you have a lot of overlap in terms of this community aspect, but also as it connects to the person. And I think that that's the more valuable part of it. I mean, for me, golf is one of those places to be immersed in nature. It is to take a few hours and just be. And you can connect with the land. You can hear the birds. I mean, my course, they have hawks that you see the baby hawks grow up over the course of the season. You get to see them actually start flying around, and you're witnessing nature in a way that I don't think most people would have been able to get access to just by being out there and being willing to take club and hit a ball towards a hole. And, Scotland's definitely on my list to play the old course because I think there's such a history there that I really want to experience. But the coolest part, I think, about that course in St. Andrews is that it is what it is. It's always been, and it always will be. This place that's right on the coast, beautiful.
The community loves it and cherishes it.
Mm-hmm.
And the community is 100% behind that golf course and always has been. It's the original municipal golf course.
Still is a municipal golf course. That's the beauty of it.
It's a dog park on Sundays, which I love.
Oh, no way.
The most cherished, almost a golf course that gives you a connection to the divine is just like, let's just let people walk their dogs on Sundays and shut down the course. So there's really this sense of reverence at that golf course, but also not taking itself seriously at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's the understanding of it's a community place. Like literally one day a week, every week of the year, it's closed as a public park. You can go sit, you can walk across the Swilken Bridge, you can sit next to 18th Green and have a beer, you can walk your dog around the front nine, take your loved one on a first date or whatever, right? Like, it's amazing.
Wow, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to thank you both for just being on the podcast and talking all things golf from a very different perspective, because I think it's one that a lot of people haven't had exposure to, but also hopefully open some doors into, giving golf a shot, looking at your local municipal golf course and maybe, hey, I'll go ask the pro shop for a putter and putt a little bit, or look into how they maintain the natural system around it. So I just want to thank you both for just bringing such a fresh look to it and kind of what the future of golf can look like. And, the hope is that this spreads to, an adoption from all the municipal golf courses. Like, how can we make this a better place for our community? Cool. So thank you both.
Steve, it was an honor. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
Thank you for listening to the Sustainable Goat podcast. I'm your host, Steve Castanem. With each episode, we can further define what it means to create a truly sustainable and resilient future.
I think the new status is to show that you actually care. You want to drive change and you want to be part of a sustainable future.
People fight for what they love.
Let's really all start for a small but significant shift in the way we live, we consume, and we plan our life.
Join us at sustainablegoat.com.